Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday. It is 9:15 a.m. Central Time, and you are with me, Tracy Brown, for the Sunday morning Science of Mind class hosted by CSLDallas. And I know some of you were expecting Dr. Petra, but you got Tracy instead. And all of us together, you and me and all of us together, can take a breath as we begin our time together. And in that breath of silence, let us all send healing energy to our beloved Dr. Petra. Please breathe with me now. And with this breath, the perfect wholeness that is divine, that is spirit is expressing in, as, and through Dr. Petra, Arya, Reverend Karen, each one of us breathing together now, and all of humanity. And so it is. One thing I love about us coming together on Sunday morning is that we get to spend 45 minutes-ish and really dive a little bit deeper into a small part of the Science of Mind textbook written by Ernest Holmes. And in so doing, it gives us the opportunity to really refine our understanding of basic spiritual law and spiritual principle. And today we are continuing in the chapter, What the Mystics Have Taught. And we've been looking since the beginning of the month of September 2021. We've been actually looking at what is it that the mystics have taught us, some of which science has corroborated or has affirmed, but the mystics are telling us and teaching us and modeling for us how the world works, how spiritual principle works. And in this chapter, there are several sections. So last week, Petra got into individuality and what the mystics taught us about that. And today, we're going to be in the section that begins on the bottom of page 334. What did the mystics teach us about ultimate salvation for all? Now, I'm just intrigued by the title of the section because maybe some of you grew up like me being taught that salvation was not for all, that you had to earn salvation, that you had to follow specific rules if you had any hope of maybe experiencing salvation. But let's read together what Ernest Holmes reminds us of. The mystics have taught that there is but one ultimate reality, and that this ultimate reality is here now, if we could but see it. The great mystics have been illumined. They have seen through the veil of matter and perceived the spiritual universe. They have taught that the kingdom of God is now present and needs to be realized. It's already present. It just needs to be realized. And they have apparently sensed that this kingdom is within. One of the most illuminating things which mysticism has revealed is that evil is not an ultimate reality. It is simply an experience of the soul on its journey toward reality. Evil is not an entity, but an experience on the pathway of self-unfoldment. It is not a thing of itself, but simply a misuse of power. It will disappear when we stop looking at or indulging in it. We cannot stop believing in it as long as we indulge in it. So the mystic has always taught the human race to turn away from evil and to do good. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. I had to stop and think for a minute. But yeah, that is so powerful. Just the beginning understanding that the ultimate reality is here. Like, it has been created. We have been created as part of that, but we don't realize it. So we get distracted by temporary human experiences, and we label them, we give them power, we pretend they are, or we believe they are the reality, and then we psychoanalyze it or we rationalize it in our minds that that's what's really true and it's bad, and so there is evil, and evil is trying to control us, affect us, and evil is the barrier between me and salvation. But Ernest Holmes reminds us that one of the reasons that we recognize the mystics, because the mystics are the ones who live their lives beyond that limitation. They see the things that aren't working out as temporary. They see the things that are, that on a human level we label as bad or even evil, but we label them as bad or challenging. And the mystics have demonstrated over and over that they realize the absolute is the spiritual principle. The absolute is the spiritual reality, and they allow that to be their guide. So, right in that last paragraph, when Ernest Holmes is writing about evil will disappear when we stop looking at it or stop indulging it, and we can't stop believing in it as long as we indulge in it. Okay, now this is a really important point. Not believing in it and not indulging in it is not the same thing as denying its existence or ignoring it. Okay, that's really important. When we are experiencing fear or sadness or grief or anger, the mystics recognize that was a feeling, an emotion that was a reaction to whatever was going on. But the reality is that wholeness is simply here. Joy is here. Peace is here. It is present. It is available if I turn my attention toward it, if I seek it, if I let go of my attachment to pain and sorrow and betrayal and fear and anger. But I have to be the one who is willing to let that go, acknowledge its presence, and see it, literally and figuratively, move away from me. Because my attention and my focus is on my own salvation, my own expression of the influence my divinity has on my human experience. So let's keep reading. In the middle of page 335. Furthermore, the mystics have taught the ultimate salvation of all people and the immortality of every soul. That may sound familiar to many of you who are familiar with the Science of Mind Declaration of Principles. Principle number 3, we believe in the immortality, eternality, and continuity of the individual soul forever and ever expressing or expanding, one of those words. Indeed, they have taught that immortality is here and now. If we would but awake to the fact, immortality, the ongoing expression of your soul, it is happening right here, right now. There's no waiting until the physical goes away for your soul to then express and be saved from the human experience. No. Your divinity is your salvation in this very breath. I'm grounded in peace and joy and wholeness. I am saved And then I'm pausing because that's a whole nother conversation. There's nothing I need to be saved from. But we're using the human language. We are having the human experience. And so let's not get too caught up in the semantics. We don't have a better word. Or maybe if you can think of a better word than salvation or being saved to represent the conscious choice of freedom, right? We have the freedom. Then if you can think of a better word than saved or salvation to describe our transition into that, then when I open up for questions and comments, then please raise your hand if you're in the Zoom room, or put it in the chat, and Ryan will look for it. But for this purpose, and in following the language that Ernest Holmes is using, I'm going to go back to the top of that paragraph and then read the whole paragraph. Furthermore, the mystics have taught the ultimate salvation of all people and the immortality of every soul. Indeed, they have taught us that immortality is here and now if we would just awake to that fact. Quote, "Beloved, now are we the sons of God." End quote. Since each soul is some part of the whole, it's impossible that any soul can be lost. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Damnation has been as foreign to the thought of the mystic as any concept of evil must be to the mind of God. The great mystics taught that humanity should have no burdens and would have none if humanity turned to the One. Quote from the Bible, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." End quote. Jesus knew that it would be impossible for all men to come to him as a personality. He must have meant that we should come into his understanding of life and reality. Someday, we shall learn to lay our burdens on the altar of love, that they may be consumed by the fire of faith in the living Spirit. Humanity would have no burdens if we kept this high watch toward the One, if we always turned to God. I love this as I love it as a reminder that the mystics are people who lived this, who experienced it so fully. They could model it or demonstrate it. They could write about it. They could sing about it. They could show us the way to remember that we're already saved, that our experience is happening, and it is an experience that is within the divine, and it's up to us to remember that and to choose to turn toward that instead of turning toward human limitation and human fear. Our emotions have a purpose. We never ever want to eliminate them. We want to feel sad. We want to experience grief, because grief is when someone we love, care for, and their physical body dies, and they are no longer physically going to be accessible to us. Our grief is just a reflection of love, right? It's love on the spectrum that we are sad. We don't want to eliminate that. We're not automatons. We want to feel that, but we don't want to be so stuck in that grief that we forget that we are here for life. And that can be true for any emotion or any experience we have. So the mystics have basically shown us that this immortality, or this replacement of evil with love, is really at our disposal with every breath. Notice it, acknowledge it, and then choose what is my next step or my next action toward the love, the joy, the peace, the beauty, the wholeness that is my truth. And in the second part of this section, where Ernest Holmes reminds us that even Jesus, right? Jesus told us, and in the Bible, those who wrote the Bible and captured the story and the example of Jesus, that Jesus knew it would be impossible for every single person in humanity to come to him as a person. But since we all are from the same Creator, turning toward that one source that is the breath of all of us and all that has been created, allows us to actually recognize and remember that temporary human burdens, or what we label as burdens, they're just our experience. We could stop judging them. That would be a good beginning. But we feel them and experience them as burdens. And we can turn those burdens over to spiritual principles, spiritual law, spiritual healing. That is what we do when we are applying spiritual principle and practicing spiritual behaviors and actions. And I'm going to add one more piece to this before I open up for your questions and comments. Sometimes we make the mistake and think, oh, I do my spiritual practice every day. Oh, there will not be any burdens in my life anymore. I've turned all my burdens over to God, and God will carry them. And we're doing that separation thing. I am me, and God is Santa Claus, and going to just take all my burdens away, even before I experience them. That's called spiritual bypass. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, I have the human experience, and I am able to recognize that if I want to use the word salvation, salvation is mine now. I don't have to wait until I die and some guy in the sky swoops me up and saves me from all my human pain. I can stop my human pain right now by noticing it, saying, this pain is not the truth of me. I am already saved because I have the spiritual or the divinity part of me that is also operating, and it is my essential truth. Whatever this pain is just an experience, and it is moving through my life. It is not who I am. So, let's talk about ultimate salvation for all. What you got? What questions do you have? What comments are coming to your mind? What examples? Ryan.
Well, good morning to you, Dr. Tracy. So glad to be a part of this conversation, and welcome to everybody who's watching us either here in the Zoom room or on Facebook Live. We love to see you, love to hear from you. And now is your opportunity to join our conversation. And there's a few ways you can do that. If you're here in the Zoom room, we just encourage you to hit the raise your hand icon located down below. Or you can always put your questions and comments in the chat, and I'll bring those into the room. And the same goes true for those who are watching us on Facebook. Go ahead and put your questions and comments in the chat, and I can bring that into the room. So we really love to hear from anybody here in the Zoom. So I'm going to open it up, and if anybody wants to raise their hand, they can. And as we're waiting for some folks, I do want to circle back to what is another word for salvation. So I put that in the chat to just see what people thought. And you want to know what the word is that they came up with?
I want to know.
Drum roll, please. awakened.
I love that. Let me just play with that a little bit. If I didn't use the word salvation, and I use the word I am awakening, I have been awakened, I am awakened. Salvation, awaken. Yes, 100%.
I agree as well. So it looks like we have a hand raised. I'm going to ask Brenda, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and join the conversation?
Good morning, Dr. Tracy.
Good morning.
Ryan and the community. In just turning in this morning, first off, my alternate word for salvation, I'm in foundations class right now, would have to be grace. Not only being awakened to the truth, but being in conscious connection and awareness of that truth's presence around, in, and through me. So for me, I'm going to add beyond awaken, you have to not only be conscious. And for this week's lesson for me, I also got the lesson on needing to accept and receive. Salvation or grace or awakening may not be there, but I got mired in the old story and got sucked into such pain and fear and despair that my connection with spiritual truth was broken. And I was aware of it, and I knew that if I didn't do something outrageous for me, that I didn't know how to get out of it. And what was brand new behavior, number one, I picked up the phone and I called a friend within the community. And I said, I'm having a bad time. And they weren't available. And I said, this is not a good time for me, I'll get back with you. Oops. New behavior for me, number two. I called again. And I called again. And I called the class teacher. I called one of the head reverends. I went to meditation. I called the instructor after meditation. I called like 5 people and said, I am literally in profound existential crisis because of some of the stuff I was in conflict with over love. And I know it's wrong. I know it's not truth. And I don't know how to get out of it. And the Lord let me, the universe let me sit with that for 24 hours. And I had to sit in that. I know I'm not connected. I've reached out. I've done reading. I tried to meditate, and I could not get my mind wrapped past the negative emotions and the old story. And the following day, after I had to sit there for a day, knowing that I wasn't connected, that I didn't know how to get back and wasn't being successful, everybody called. Every single person that I had reached out to called within a 3.5, 4 hour period. I got so prayed up during that 4 hour period of time, and so much insight and so much wisdom and so much guidance about that I was stuck in the story. And something as simple as drawing the little square of my story in a bigger circle of love and spiritual truth around it, or the 4 squares listing out the stages of consciousness that Dr. Petra was working on, those 2 things, and the love and help of friends, practitioners, and ministers, all who gave of themselves and reached a hand out and held up a mirror to show me not only my distorted thinking, but to remind me I'm not alone and remind me of my spiritual truth. So how did I get salvation? I connected with others when I couldn't remember it myself. I had to be reminded, and the beauty of this community and these classes and services is that I developed the community that can hold up the mirror to me when I get mired in my practices. And it was, so I told the minister and 2 practitioners, I'm so confused. My life is changing so much. I don't know who the fuck I am. And this is crisis for me. And all three of them said, great, fabulous, that's wonderful, that's incredible, that's the best place you can be. And I'm sitting here in my mind saying, yeah, thank you very much. And it took me a little while to sit with that. But the fact that so many people turned to me in love, so many people turned to me with help and with support and with nurturance. And the other thing that I learned from that is I only have to tell the story a little bit to get the idea. The more I tell the story, the more I get mired in it. And all I had to do is say, okay, I get it. I get the gist. And here's what I'm seeing of the spiritual truth you forgot. So my comments on salvation, my thanks to you, Ryan, for making the technology possible, the classes, the community, because you all literally brought me back from the brink this week when I couldn't do it myself. That is salvation, and that is grace, and that is unity. I am complete.
Beautiful. And you said it all, like, if we could take those 4 minutes and pull the audio out, that would be a great explanation of what happens to all of us. There is no time nor space in spirit, in the divine. And so a lot of times when we create this expectation, I'm in crisis and everything needs to stop right now and get me out of it, there's a purpose of being in it enough that then we actually can see the difference and feel the difference as we pull out. And thanks, Brenda, too, for being the example of this is how we support each other. And all the practitioners are available, and people you've taken classes with can all be a support. One of my favorite songs is When I Forget, and it's that request of, will you remember, or I will remember when you forget, and will you remember for me when I forget. So your week was a demonstration of that, and absolutely a demonstration of what we're talking about this morning, about salvation really being a shift in consciousness and a remembrance of our divinity that is always present. Ryan.
I thought that was a great example as well. And I had another quick example that I wanted to share with everybody before I asked Jeff to join the conversation. What they put here in the comments, it goes like this. Salvation is living from the heart, fully in the present moment, putting our attention fully in now, rather than on body conditions or conditions of the environment, or on things of the past. So I thought that was another great example as well.
Yes, the chat is A1 on top of things this morning. Keep it going. Keep it going. That's beautiful. I'm going to go back this afternoon and look for that and copy it and put it on my bathroom mirror as a reminder for me.
Absolutely. So I want to just ask Jeff, do you want to unmute yourself and join the conversation?
Sure. Good morning, Dr. Tracy.
Good morning.
Well, as a cradle Catholic, I guess I never really heard, thinking about this stuff, spiritual truth, and the whole concept of spiritual truth, being saved. I think of the business of religion, the TV evangelist. You are saved, and send in your $1,000 so we can buy a second jet. So I guess from a cradle Catholic point of view, I never really heard that term before, spiritual truth, and so that's an amazing discovery for me to explore. But I guess I wrote down 4 things what salvation means to me. Number 1 is salvation means saved. I'm saved from my wrong thinking. Thinking one thing, believing one thing, that there's an old man with a beard in the sky kind of thing that I have to watch for, that I wanna please. If not, I'm gonna be punished. Number two is my illusion that the physical world is all there is. And number three, my terrible preoccupation with myself. If it isn't part of my personal experience, it just doesn't exist. And number four, saved from my past, the hurts, the wounds, the trauma, and the concept of principle is not bound by precedent. So, yeah, I'm still a novice, I guess, 3.5 years into showing up at CSLDallas, and I've come a long way, but there's still some stuff that I still battle with, as you know, and it's great to continue, like Brenda said, to have a community of support to be my backstop, and I'm learning to put a second seat in the pilot seat, my co-pilot being spirit, is part of my life instead of trying to do it all by myself. So that's my 5.5 cents.
Beautiful. And just want to remind you and everybody else, so you're like, oh, I guess I'm just a novice 3.5 years in. I'm 3.5 decades in, and I'm still a novice in so many ways, right? I'm 3.5 decades in, all right, so maybe I'm not a novice, but I still have to remind myself all the time what is true with a capital T. I have to remind myself all the time and take myself through the experience of whatever's going on in my human life. Not to ignore it, not even to judge it, but to travel through it, always keeping my vision on what I know is spiritual truth, what I know is good, what I know is possible. And I love your 4 points. I think they're right on target. And maybe 2, 3, and 4 go back to your number 1, which, paraphrasing, was about being saved from my own thoughts. And the key that hit me, as you said, that was my thoughts, because that's really what's happening. I'm the only one who can change my thoughts. There's nothing outside of me. There's no one outside of me who can change my thoughts or who can change my mind. I can read a lot of stuff. People can tell me a lot of things, but they don't change my mind or change my thoughts. I may listen and consider, and then I change my thoughts. When I change my thinking, I change my beliefs, I change my behavior changes my habits, and then I change my life. So Jeff, brilliant, and those 4 things are a great way to think about how does salvation or being saved apply to me, because it leads me to greater awakening. So, Ryan, you got anybody else before we add something?
Why, yes, I do. I'd love to call into the room Anita. Do you want to join the conversation, Anita?
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Good morning, Dr. Tracy.
Hi, Anita.
Yeah, salvation, it's a great conversation, right? Especially for those of us who grew up in traditional Judeo-Christianity, where, your only way to God was through Jesus Christ, right? And the blood that he shed. So that aside, like you, I'm 3+ decades into this philosophy, and yet I still have times that I have to remind myself, of the truth that, you already read about from Scripture, that, brethren, now are ye the children of God. It wasn't something to be in the future that you could reap, and everything that the kingdom has already been given. And to come into this teaching and philosophy to awaken to the fact that that kingdom already exists within me.
Yes.
You know, when I walked into this, 30 some years ago and heard that, it was like I felt like I was finally coming home to the truth of who I was. Mm-hmm. And, that in itself is my salvation, because that kingdom within me, it's who I am. Yes. It's home. It's where I belong. And that very breath of God that was spoken of is what breathes me every day. And there's nowhere that I can go, because we even teach, that, the center of God is everywhere. So there's no place that I can go that God is not. And so I don't have to wait for some pie in the sky. It's here today, and it's real. And I can experience it. So for all of that, I'm grateful for being able to come home.
Now that's a Sunday talk right there. You all are here for the Sunday morning class, but you just got a Sunday morning talk, because that right there is the gold. That is the truth. That is also the reminder that it's a journey for us to remember. We are having the human experience, but when we know this truth, it does allow us to, in one sense, save ourselves, which is not arrogant, because each one of us is an emanation and expression of the one God. So can you even imagine that God, Spirit, the universal presence, whatever phrase resonates with you, that it would punish itself and see itself as broken or worthy of pain and punishment? No. It would be, wow, that's happening. How do I, quote unquote, fix it? Which means go through it and return to the wholeness, the joy, and the peace that is. Anita, also thank you for bringing out or holding up how Ernest Holmes quotes the Bible and refers to Jesus, who we refer to most often as the example, not the exception, or the master teacher, or the way shower, the human incarnation that has shown us the way to live in alignment with spiritual truth. And for anybody who is wanting to really take that on, really understand it mentally, but even more so, live it, I cannot recommend any more highly. I cannot recommend any class more than, well, that's not true. So let me think about how I want to phrase this. I can highly recommend that you sign up for the upcoming New Thought and the Bible, like the metaphysical interpretation of the Bible. And this fall we're doing the New Testament. Dr. Petra has been a scholar of the Bible and how you interpret what's in the Bible from a metaphysical perspective. She is amazing around philosophy, and so she brings in all the ancient philosophy and the ancient wisdom, but with the New Testament really helping us see what it is that Jesus did and how he was using spiritual principle and how we can do the same. You may think, I don't want to take a class about the Bible. I don't even ever want to read the Bible again. Or I never grew up reading the Bible. I don't get it. I'm in New Thought now. metaphysical interpretation of the New Testament will teach you everything you need to know and help you understand all the stories in the Bible in this context. What does it mean? What does salvation mean? What does love mean? How do you live it? And what was the example that Jesus was showing us? So all of these, as Ernest Holmes quotes the Bible when he's referring to the mystics and what they have taught us, and when he's referring to how we should live our lives, it's not to hold Jesus up as the exception, right? Anita's comment about, learning in traditional Judeo-Christian backgrounds, the only way to get to heaven is through Jesus. Well, I don't have any problem with that phrase anymore, because it's through the example that Jesus set, through me living in that same way of complete faith and trust, living in that way that represents, I know the truth and I will not be moved from it. Oh yeah, I guess I am going through Jesus, right? Except I'm living it in my life in a way that demonstrates. Now that may seem like it's a little bit of a digression from our focus today and this month, but it's really not. This chapter is what the mystics have taught, and this section is ultimate salvation for all. That ultimate salvation is just a breath away, just a thought away, just a choice away. Choosing to heal or to reveal the truth, to heal our human limitations by revealing the truth of who we are. So we've got a few more minutes. I'm going to go right into this next paragraph because I think it takes us into where we need to be in order to close today's session. Reading beginning at the very last line of page 335. In mental healing, the spiritual practitioner should sense everyone as a divine being, thus causing an awakening of the divinity which is latent in all people. This spiritual awakening should never be divorced from the mental act, which is to awaken the mind to the realization of spirit. The universe is right now a spiritual system. The problem of evil does not enter into this contemplation. This does not mean that we can keep on doing evil. It is a personal and not a cosmic problem, and it disappears when we no longer contemplate it. So through the next three paragraphs in this section, Ernest Holmes just expounds upon that and gives us some suggestions for how to practically apply this in our own lives. And then he ends this section with this. There cannot be a spiritual law in the universe which demands evil or which demands lack or limitation. There is no law that demands unhappiness. Therefore, what the mystics have taught us is that evil only has the power to destroy itself. It's not God ordained. Reality, capital R reality, in reality, evil is just an illusion. But the mystics have not denied evil as an experience. It's an experience all have had. The great have not failed to recognize the appearance of evil, but they have separated the appearance from the reality. So we're going to end this week with this. Mystics have done away with evil as a cosmic entity. No devil, no hell, no torment, no damnation outside of one's own thoughts. No punishment outside of that self-inflicted punishment through ignorance. No salvation outside of conscious cooperation with the infinite. Heaven and hell our states of consciousness. Let's all take our state of consciousness into and ascend it, or reach up, or raise it up into the level of what we define as heaven on earth. Let's use our metaphysical practices this week for our ultimate salvation, or as maybe we have agreed, our ultimate awakening. This is how we apply the principles of science of mind in the world today. And during our celebration, our Sunday celebration, in about 30 minutes, we're going to go further into the 4 kingdoms of consciousness, really focusing on Kingdom 4, what it is, and how that in itself aligns with this conversation this morning about our own awakening and our own salvation. Have a great week, everybody.